Welcome to the Meat and Potatoes podcast. Today we're here with Tanner Olson, who's the managing partner and owner of Legend Partners Commercial Real Estate and the managing founder of Red West Country Music Festival, which is coming up in
October, first weekend in October.
So we're going to talk a little bit about commercial real estate and then Red West and everything that goes into giving a platform for people to have fun.
Amen. I like it.
Because at the end of the day, they'll all leave and go home, and you'll know what it took to pull that off.
Oh, yeah.
It's like going to a fancy wedding where you just shovel food in your face and then drive away, and somebody else has to deal with the cleanup.
And I'm planning my own wedding right now, so I also know what that's like.
You're just a glutton for punishment.
Yeah.
Let's start a little bit with like your 9-to-5 day job of commercial real estate. When headlines start showing up in the Wall Street Journal, that means that you guys have been in the know about it, whether it's good or bad, for months or even years before. But bit tricky, these waters, to navigate the last couple of years with commercial real estate. Is that correct?
For sure, because we operate on such a long timeline compared to, say residential real estate, contract timelines, but also just how long it takes things to get developed are, 2, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years in advance. Take the Utah State Prison, from the day they tore that down to the day someone moves into a building on that site, I bet you is 6-7 years.
Yeah.
And interest rates decided to do a 180 2 years ago. So, you can do all the planning you want, but you can only plan so much and only have so many contingencies for chaos.
Yeah. And then you got weird things like the pandemic where people are working from home, and then you got the managing directors or the owners of the building. They're like, well, darn it, we don't really need this much space anymore. And you guys are the ones that get to deal with all of it.
Fortunately, I am not in office commercial real estate, although Class A office commercial real estate in Utah is doing really well.
Yeah.
But the B and C office is definitely struggling. And I mean, being an office broker was the creme de la creme of commercial real estate. And now today, I think, you really got to be one of the top dogs in the market to be making a splash.
So where do you guys focus in then?
So I primarily focus on land and retail. Ends up dabbling a little bit into multifamily just because there's a lot of mixed use stuff out there, apartments with retail underneath.
Yeah.
Or what I call flex space. So it's not quite industrial and it's not quite retail. And that's actually almost become its own asset class that's growing a lot right now that I've found very interesting, and is, there's a lot of demand to develop flex space.
Yeah. Flexibility is key, in like even just driving up and down I-15 or when you're going to the airport, you see some of these of, that's a dual use, or they're getting 5 uses out of that same thing that traditionally would have just been a building.
Yeah, I mean, when you think of industrial, you think of like manufacturing, or like they're actually creating some sort of material or product inside of a space. When you think of retail, you think of maybe like a restaurant or a boutique fitness gym or a clothing store, but there's this like weird asset class that could be this room that we're doing a podcast in. It could be someone selling appliances. It could be a daycare. It could be gymnastics studio. It could be a dog daycare. I mean, truly, like there's a million uses for these flex spaces that we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've been to some recently where it's, what are we doing in here?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot going on. And it makes sense just from like a common sense level of it can be used for a lot of different things.
For sure.
And do you guys focus on like new builds, buying old assets and refurbishing?
Today, it's a lot easier and a lot cheaper if you can try to refurbish something or reposition maybe an older asset of some kind. Or, I think we saw it more 4 or 5 years ago where you saw the Shopkos and the Kmarts and the Gordmans of the world all go BK, and then you had these 100,000 square foot boxes of what do we do with these, and there's not a lot of users for those. So, you're seeing that happen across the board, but now, even other various asset classes, how do we convert a Class C office building into multifamily? How do we take a older bank building and maybe split it in half and put a drive-through tenant in there and one other tenant?
Yep.
Because replacement cost, meaning to build something brand new from the ground up, is just going to be 200% more than repurposing an older building.
Yeah.
You know, we do that as much as we possibly can, but Utah also is growing so much, and there's so much demand for retail and flex space in, you know, Bluffdale, Daybreak, Saratoga, you name it. There's so much demand that tenants can afford to pay higher rents, and fortunately, if you can pay enough in rent, we can afford to build something brand new. So we're still seeing a good amount of just ground up development in the high growth areas of the valley.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting. There's a big project over where I live in Holiday, the old Cottonwood Mall redevelopment.
Yeah, 20 years in the making, I think.
Yeah. And the developers, and it's changed hands a few times if memory serves, you know, they had to go through the ringer and, you know, present to everyone, right? The citizenry and everything. This is going to be mixed use, and here's what that means. And there's an old Macy's there that was the only structure that it was just like standing sentinel. And you look at it and it's like, that could take a huge bombardment, right? Like, it'd be a shame if they tore that down and it ended up in a landfill. So they are repurposing it for, I probably would assume, condos, right?
So yeah, the top, I think the top 2 or 3 floors are going to be Class A offices, and then the main floor will be retail.
Yeah.
So I remember buying a dress shirt there in like 2012, and feeling like you could have fired a gun off in the building and no one would have done anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so and then like the rest of it, you know, is built brand new, but there's, you know, standalone houses, there's mixed use, there's condos, there's office space, so it's kind of a smorgasbord of all of that, and it makes sense in a lot of ways.
Yeah, they have Lifetime Fitness that they're talking to. I don't think the deal's 100% done, but that would be a huge boon for that area, because with that high quality of a gym then attracts other high quality users that want to be near that. So I think they're talking to a lot of other great first to market restaurants where Utah's kind of hit that runway finally, where we have, you know, some of the sexier restaurants that you see in Austin, Denver, Las Vegas are now finally looking at Salt Lake City and saying, hey, it looks like, you know, the demographics support the sales, and more importantly, for a lot of the reason restaurants didn't come to Utah is the alcohol sales is what they're worried about.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes for a lot of those restaurants, that's, you know, 15 to 30% of their business. So we finally hit that demographic change that is supporting that is bringing some better brands into Utah, like SDK downtown across from Delta Center.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned that particular one we're talking about 20 years in the making, but there's a lot that goes into these things, right? Of all the way down to like, well, they don't have a good palate in Utah, but they don't deserve these restaurants yet. And it's like, well, no, it's really just the booze sells. And,
Yeah.
And it's not like, oh, we're just going to do it like this. A lot of people have inputs, and you got a lot of hoops to jump through, from my understanding and talking to folks from your industry. And then again, kind of like event planning, it's like, oh, cool. This is well thought out.
Yeah.
There's like 8 out of the 10 things I need in life are like all within 1 square mile. But that didn't happen just like by luck.
Yeah, that, and, you know, in an area like Holiday, you had the neighborhood, like the neighbors themselves. We use the term NIMBY a lot in commercial real estate. And, you know, you could say that Holiday project would have came together 2-3 times in the past if the neighbors didn't using it as a verb, NIMBY it down, or, you know.
And I might have been one of those, because they came with like petitions, and there was talks of, I think it was 14 stories. Which
was crazy, to be fair.
Yeah. So I'm like, yeah, we better not have that. So I was a NIMBY.
And it's tough, because it's a fine line of, you know, creating a cool project and getting enough density to make a project actually make money, because ultimately nothing gets built unless it makes money.
Yep.
And I think we forget that sometimes, especially with, you know, having a housing problem, and you have to create, you know, just this year alone, we're going to deliver twice as many apartment units in downtown than we have in any year prior.
Yeah.
And what have rents done in downtown? Well, look at that. They stayed flat or they've gone down. So creating an abundance of supply and demand didn't keep up drives rents down. And that's good for, I mean, everyone but the developers. But I don't think, speaking as a developer myself and being a part of a development company, you know, for apartments, people don't necessarily feel bad for developers. No. They got their bag over the last several years, but you know, ultimately that is what drives the economy and creates opportunity.
Yeah, it is an interesting, you guys are a big cog of like how everything always works. And, but yeah, you don't get a lot of sympathy, your guys' industry. Even all the way to like the legislature, and I have no idea if it's true, but like there's too many developers in the legislature, right? Something I've heard over the years. And so yeah, sucks for you guys, but it all works out in the end, right? Like as long as the markets are in equilibrium.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think just we're fortunate enough to live in a state with a great economy. I think we went from a strong economy to an economy that's truly just on fire right now. And I don't know what's going to cool that off, so to speak. I mean, I'm sure we have some environmental challenges, but I think just about any major metropolitan market you go to, there's going to be certain challenges, whether it's wildfires in California or hurricanes in Florida and earthquakes in Seattle. I mean, you name it, you're going to face something. So.
Yep. And with a good, strong, robust economy where people are employed and having fun, you get to do things like music festivals, which is not common in a lot of the world, right? Like you're just scraping by, but here you get to pick and choose what kind of fun you have. What enticed you to do a music festival from the ground up, right? You just didn't inherit this.
Yeah, I kind of stumbled into funding music events in 2019, I guess you could say. I had a buddy that wanted to do a music festival, and it was going to be just a small hip hop festival, and it was going to be in the year 2020. So we all know what happened there, and ended up throwing a music festival in 2021. Was just a part of it. Hive Music Festival. We had Post Malone headline, despite some bad headlines, and we had one of our headliners get COVID. Yeah. So there's always just going to be things out of your control, and as much bad press as we got, ultimately, it felt like a pretty successful event. I mean, Post Malone put on one of the coolest performances I've ever seen in person. So that was a huge success. That was awesome. We tried to run it back in 2022, or maybe it was 23. I can't even remember off the top of my head. We partnered with a bigger partner, and the music industry over the last 5 years has really just been a roller coaster where you had 2019, streaming services are basically have taken over music. You don't have CDs. Artists are no longer really making a ton of money off of CD sales. And so everyone kind of turned to touring to make their money. And then 2020 happens, and all of a sudden, you have hundreds of music events and festivals around the country to zero, and you don't have anything for a full year. And so demand for live music in 2021, when events finally did start happening, was through the roof. Yeah. I personally had bought tickets to music festivals in 2019 that I then attended in like late 2021. We're talking like almost 2 years after I'd bought a ticket. I'm now finally attending the event that I bought the ticket for. Yeah. And so everything was selling out. Artists, because everything was selling out, could also demand super premiums for their booking fees. And so you saw artist booking fees also go through the roof. And so just same thing, supply and demand, over the, let's say last 2 years now, people have kind of cooled off their interest for attending live music, but artists are also still demanding a premium for their booking fees. And so there's kind of been a bloodbath in the live music world where you've seen a lot of music festivals get canceled. We personally had Hive year 2 get canceled, just, some of it logistics, some of it trying to just get, all the pieces together. You've thrown big events yourself, how big of a nightmare it is. And so it's just been a roller coaster over the last 5 years for kind of the live music industry. And ultimately that now leads me to Red West today, where we've also just seen a dramatic shift in genre preference of there's just not a ton of preference. There's not a big anchor hip hop artist today like there might have been 10 years ago, or as many, you could say. Yeah. And then alternatively, country music's never been hotter in the pretty much every country concert it feels like is selling out. And there's, the 10 years ago we had Jason Aldean and Tim McGraw and a lot of really big country names, and the new gen of country music is here, and there's a demand for it. So that's exciting. Yeah.
So none of that sounds fun, right? Just the yin and yang, the cause and effect. 1 year it's great, the next year you have to cancel, high fees, all of this, 2 years wait. but yet you're still going to give her a go. And I'm glad it's, country music. Because again, like you analyze that and this is where you guys landed. Those festivals, I'm not a huge festival goer, but I have been to a few, and they're fun. And it's not just like cowboys, right? Like there's normal people that love that type of music, and they will go to these. So how do you plan this Red West? Because what I think is like it's a bigger demographic that you could entice.
For sure. So this year I went to Coachella and I went to Stagecoach. They're at the same venue, the exact same venue. It goes Coachella weekend 1, Coachella weekend 2, Stagecoach. They only have one weekend. And the amount of just families at Stagecoach versus say Coachella, like Coachella's a very, early 20s to maybe late 30s demographic. That's their prime profile. Influencers, there's a lot of money at it. Stagecoach is just a much more accessible. There's kids there. There's the grandparents with their kids. People have chairs. They're sitting down.
Yeah.
They're laying out on a blanket. And that's what made us kind of lean in towards maybe doing a country event is we just felt like it was a little bit more accessible. Create a family-friendly environment. I mean, I think Utah's slowly learning that people can drink at events and still be responsible and like have families there and kids. And
Yep.
so, I think the appeal of country music is a little bit broader today. There's like subgenres within country that are a little bit more accessible to everyone. So,
Yeah.
All in all, we just are excited to have, a little bit wider of appeal than hip hop can be a little bit of a niche genre.
Yeah, for sure. Like you'd have to pay me a lot of money to go to a hip hop festival, like a lot of money. And to your point, yeah, the country ones, they have families spend more money than 28-year-olds, and grandparents spend a lot more money than 28-year-olds. So I assume economically, if you've got that demographic, it's a little bit easier for it to pencil out as well. With a festival, you've got a lot of egos and logistics. Weird stuff happens, right? So how many performers do you guys have? Let's just talk like the details of the event. Where is it? When is it?
So we're at the fairgrounds on North Temple, just right outside of downtown. What we love about that is, obviously the biggest center of mass of people is near downtown. You could take tracks there. It's a cheap Uber. We wanted our event to be very accessible to just basically all of the Wasatch Front. The fairgrounds is a great venue because it already has just a lot of amenities that are there, food stands, restrooms, like we said, the mass transportation being right nearby, big, giant, large open field, tons of parking. We love it. And then early October, weather-wise, should be fantastic. The fall in Utah, in my opinion, always the best season.
Yeah.
And I believe we're somewhere around 35 artists over 3 days.
Oh, wow.
With 2 stages. So we're excited about that. We have a large offering. Having 2 stages will be nice because we can kind of counter program. When one artist is wrapping up, we can have another artist start.
Yeah.
And just like every other music festival, we'll have various fun activities, food, various vendors, and just kind of games and prizes and stuff like that people can do if they're not into the artist that's performing at that time. So.
Yeah. Which happens. So you send out the bat signal. We got this Red West Music Festival. A lot of people would be like, well, what do you do then? Do you email people? Do you call their agents? Like you got to get those 35 people somehow. How do you guys fill up the agenda?
Top down. So you're always starting with your headliners because ultimately, like back to say like booking Hive Music Festival year 1, Post Malone just so happened to live 20 miles from where we wanted him to perform, and he hadn't played a show in a year and a half. And so he also was the largest artist on the planet at the time. And the fact that we had him, as such a big fan of our home state was awesome. And so once people know that who the headliners are and they know how many people are going to see the headliners or want to see the headliners, for smaller artists, it's kind of a selling point for like, look, you're going to be playing to a crowd of 10, 20, 30,000 people or however many it may be. So you definitely start with your headliners and then kind of build your way down the billing. And sure enough, just as you're seeing name placement on a lineup poster is critical. I mean, that says kind of how important an artist is, or maybe thinks they are.
Yeah.
How much money they're being paid, or maybe how much money they think they should be paid. And, all of that's up to a little bit of discretion, and you're negotiating all of those things and everything in between.
Yeah. I've dabbled a little bit in it, and like for Summit, and the prices for the music acts, either I thought, what a bargain, or I wouldn't pay you that much if I had $1 billion budget.
Yeah. And there's a lot that goes into the whole booking fee thing, right? Like, I'm not going to talk about how much people cost, but you catch an artist. Some artists like our state. Some artists like to perform here, and so for some reason there's a discount for that.
Yeah.
And some artists like to perform with other artists, and that can cause why a certain artist is more expensive than another. I think the biggest strategy for a lot of people booking music is you're trying to book an artist early enough, maybe before they really get hot. And so you may be paying 10 grand for an artist that had 100,000 followers on Spotify, let's just say. These are all just hypothetical numbers. And, maybe over the next 8 months, they drop 3 of their best songs of all time. And by the time they actually perform, they're now, million people following them on Spotify, and you just happen to hit the jackpot of you paid, it's almost like the stock market, but with artists.
Absolutely. So, yeah. I'd go down to a investor conference in Laguna Niguel at the Ritz-Carlton, and they'd always have, and they had a big budget. It was an investment bank. They'd always have somebody that was wildly famous 20, 30 years ago, and then an up-and-comer, to your point of like trying to time it. So it was like Billy Idol.
Yeah.
And the next night I was out on the grounds, and everybody was in suit and ties, but then there's like guys in jeans and mohawks, and I'm like, oh, interesting.
The OG Billy Idols.
Yeah. So I go down and I talk to him for a while, and there's a little bit of a southern accent, and I go, what are you guys doing here? Thinking like they were the janitors or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, we're performing tonight out in that tent, because they buy the whole parking lot. I'm like, oh, cool. So then in my mind, I'm like, oh, you guys are the up-and-comers. I'm like, cool, well, good luck.
Yeah.
What's your name? Oh, we're Florida Georgia Line.
Ah.
And they didn't even have enough songs they had like 4 or 5 of their own, and then the rest were like cover songs.
Yeah.
This was about 8 months before they were like on the radio everywhere. So they got a great deal on that one, right? The organizers of that event timed Florida Georgia Line really well.
And then it's funny because maybe the older act hasn't toured in a while, and they aren't, the hottest genre, but they were at one point in time.
Yep.
And because of that, maybe they're a little bit more reasonable in terms of what they're asking for. So
yeah, Billy Idol was big when these guys were in their 20s.
Yeah.
And now they're all like filthy rich, and they're like, how great was that? And then they go home and they're like, hey kids, have you ever heard of this Florida Georgia Line? Like, it served both purposes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like, oh, good for you guys on that one. But their whole world changed, right? Like, they caught that lightning in a bottle, and no more like slumming it. It was like private jets and big RVs, like just like that.
And they're smart. I mean, some agents know kind of what they're working with, and sometimes they won't let you book them too far in advance because they worry about that for that exact reason of, I'm not going to let you book him a year out, but if you want to do a show in 6 months, let's talk.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'd assume it's a pretty fun whiteboarding problem of, 35 different acts of you've got budget and trying to guess who's going to hit, who's going to not.
For sure. And you're trying to fill just certain voids of, like I said, subgenres of country, and, making sure you have a balance of even just, male acts and female acts, and trying to create some diversity in the lineup, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, I got this little smirk on my face because this sounds fun.
Yeah.
But it's not, ultimately. You guys have to go and like do it, and you got a lot of curveballs with anything like a big event. You'll be watching the weather really close, right?
I've never will sweat watching weather more in my life than this event or the past events that I've thrown, being an outdoor show. Because
at the end of the day, you're like, I can control this, this, and this, and there's a lot I can't.
For sure, and you definitely think about that going into it, and but I've also been to various music festivals where it pours rain, and it's also just a part of the experience of, you get what you get.
You get what you get.
Fortunately, most tickets are sold before then, you hope. But sure enough, I mean, obviously you see massive amounts of people that end up buying tickets hours before the show. So
Yep.
you just do what you can to kind of prepare for that. But
Yeah.
this festival, I think the difference between this one and some of the other stuff we've done in the past is we partnered with AEG, and AEG is a partner of Coachella and Stagecoach. And so we were smarter in that we said, if we're going to do it this time, we're just going to partner with, kind of like you did, bringing in a partner, just the people who are the most experienced in the industry at doing it.
Yeah.
And so having those guys for just various logistics has been hugely helpful. And, it's just always interesting to see how the 1,000-pound gorilla of entertainment does something versus 3 guys that chat about things in their living room on a whiteboard,
Yeah, that's why I always called them adult supervision. It wasn't a slight on us, but it was, they've been up and down the elevator a lot more than we have, and they know how to do this.
We're one of probably 50 festivals that these guys throw on a regular basis. So
Yeah, it's good to have that. So how can people get involved? Like, do you need volunteers? Obviously you need people buying tickets, but how can the community support Red West?
Yeah, so right now, we'll probably start reaching out to vendors, food vendors, stuff like that, actually probably over the next 2 months. We just kind of hit the 60-day window of our music festival, which actually just me saying that out loud kind of put a chill down my spine. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. There's a million things that I need to do and get done between now and October 4th. But I'm pretty sure our email is just info@redwestslc.com, and our website is just redwestslc.com. So there's a lot of information on the website. I know I probably have like 50 unanswered emails to people in my inbox right now of not getting back to them, but there's a lot of steps and various other sponsorships that you're trying to pin down before you maybe talk to the local food trucks or the local cowboy hat vendor to kind of get them at the show.
Yep.
So no disrespect to those people. It's there's just so many moving pieces that you put off as many things as you can until you have to.
Yeah, I get it. Well, kudos to you and your team. You've got your 9 to 5, and now you're planning your own wedding, and then you're doing this big music festival. Not bad for a Pi Kappa Alpha.
I mean, I don't have any kids right now, so I think I'm just trying to juggle as many things as I possibly can, have as much fun as I can.
Yeah.
And not that kids are a death sentence, but they definitely throw just another ringer into things. So.
Oh, for sure. Well, it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to going to it, and I don't say that very often about music festivals, but getting to know you and knowing what you guys are doing, like, it's just going to be fun, and it's nice that you can just roll on over. It's not logistically challenging.
Yeah, honestly, for me, I think I suck at singing. I can't play an instrument to save my life, and so I've just always loved live music and wanted to find a way to be a part of it and get into the music industry somehow, and this was kind of my way of a cheat code of getting into it and being able to throw a giant party and invite all my friends to it, and
there you go.
Couldn't ask for anything better.
That'll be fun. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tanner. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
You bet.